another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an insular Charles Coulombe.
Insular? You mean as pertaining to an island?
Yes, I thought you went to an island recently.
Well, I did, but I was born on one too.
That too,
My
I
my
guess.
yes, my very first memories were tropic breezes, the palm trees in Central Park. What? No? No palm trees in Central Park. Well, anyhow, I was born on an island, a small, remote, somewhat non-tropical island, Manhattan. The island at the center of the world. The capital of the world, in fact.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, where are the United Nations?
Manhattan.
Manhattan. Okay.
Turtle Bay. Manhattan.
All right.
They're up. It's up there. It's sort of midtown, up that way, on the east side. Land donated by Rockefeller. You know, it's yeah. You got a beautiful meditation room with a Marc Chagall stained glass window, which is beautiful blue, very abstract. So I don't really know what it's supposed to mean. But then why should I? It reminds me a little bit of the big blue window in St. Rita's.
Okay.
Or
Gotcha.
St. Bede's in La Cañada, the big blue window that you don't quite know what it means. And why should you? Why do you have a right to know what the window in your church means?
It's thought-provoking.
Oh, yeah, it definitely is that. It certainly is. And it's got the spirit more than any other part of the UN complex. The meditation room has the spirit of the late lamented Dag Hammarskjöld.
Who's that?
Did you really ask that question? Dag Hammarskjöld was not the first, no, but the second Secretary General of the United Nations.
Who was the first?
Trygve Lie.
Who you like more?
Dag Hammarskjöld, I guess. And then after him was the Burmese, U Thant. Then came the Austrian, Kurt Waldheim. And then I kind of lost, I forget. There was a Peruvian, there was a Korean, there was Boutros Ghali, the Egyptian Copt. The guy's running it now. I think he's a Latin American. I forget. Anyhow.
A lot of winners in there, right?
Do you hear yourself? Let me tell you something. Without the United Nations, we wouldn't have trick-or-treating for UNICEF. Yeah, gotcha there, smart guy. You wouldn't have Danny Kaye surrounded by all the children. Well, he's dead now, so he doesn't do it anymore, but he used to. And that's not all. Think of the beautiful blue and white UN flag and the blue helmets keeping peace all over this globe of ours, except in Ukraine. And I mean, it's the United Nations speaks to the dreams and aspirations of a generation marked by war and depression, an abiding hope that the world's peoples would never again have to face the evils and violence brought about by war, by famine, by disease. The United Nations represented a hope that the four freedoms could span the globe, and that together men and women everywhere of goodwill and of none could band together and build a better tomorrow for everyone.
Those are very noble aspirations, Charles.
Aren't they? Doesn't that sound great? I don't see why I'm not a paid UN spokesman. You know how much money those guys get? Gosh, I could do that. I could drop that drivel 1,000 miles a minute. I know exactly how to talk like that, and they could pay me, and I could go around the world speaking on behalf of the UN.
Why didn't you do that?
I should do that. That'd be great. That'd be wonderful. I mean, to be a UN goodwill ambassador. I mean, I could come to Arcadia and speak about goodwill.
Yeah, we need a
I,
good we need a lecture on goodwill. That's what we
you,
really need.
yes, Arcadia needs a lecture on goodwill. And you know, the funny thing, you may remember a few years ago, the neighboring town of Monrovia, where I live, we had a terrible gang problem.
Hmm.
And there was terrible combat between black and Latino gangs in northeastern Monrovia.
Hmm.
So at the time, my brother and I were talking about the possibility of calling in UN peacekeeping forces for power sharing talks between the city of Monrovia and the two gangs, and the creation of a special neutral zone where all three factions could dwell peacefully, separated by the UN peacekeepers. And you'd have both the UN flag and the American flag, the state flag and the Monrovia city flag, flying from City Hall. Wouldn't that be neat?
That would be neat.
You'd have a blue helmet accompanying each Monrovia policeman on his rounds.
What is the UN doing? What is the role of the UN when it comes to Ukraine and Russia?
Well, it's a little bit of a difficulty because you see, the United Nations are made up of the biggest institution, their most powerful institution is called the Security Council, which has 5 permanent members and a number of elected members, different countries. The 5 permanent members each have a veto over anything the Security Council does. And the 5 permanent members are the United States, Russia, inheriting the Soviet Union's position from World War II. They're the 5 major allies, in other words. Remember, the big 5 in World War II were the United States, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, nationalist China, and France.
Hmm.
So Russia inherited the Soviet Union seat, and in 1971, with American connivance, nationalist China was at last tossed out and replaced with communist China. And the thing is that any one of those 5 can veto whatever the Security Council does. So, for instance, the only reason why the UN responded to the Korean War was that Russia walked out in protest. And so they didn't veto. That's why the Korean War was fought under UN auspices. But they learned from that mistake. They never walked out again. And so during the Soviet days, whenever there was any kind of a move to condemn anything communist, it would always get vetoed by the Russians. Well, the same thing has happened today. The Russians, of course, vetoed any attempt at the Security Council to stop what's going on over there. However, having said that, in areas where none of the major powers care, where they have no interests, their UN peacekeeping is often very effective. Places like Liberia and Haiti and so on. Central African Republic. I mean, usually they're real hellholes that nobody wants to go to anyway, but the UN will go and settle the situation. So, I mean, to be fair, and I do try to be fair, it's easy to look at their failures, and they have a lot of them, but their successes, such as they are, haven't been too bad. Cambodia, today, the Kingdom of Cambodia, which is fairly stable, that's all because of the UN intervention in 1993. So, I mean, when it does work, it doesn't work badly on things like that.
So the UN is not really a forum for any sort of peacekeeping talks between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, it could be, but both sides would have to agree. And instead of using the UN, they're doing attempted bilateral talks in places like Turkey and Belarus. But it does serve in that capacity. And they also have a lot of agencies that some of which do good things, some of which do bad things. So, for instance, the WHO got famous because of its excitement during COVID.
Yeah.
But normally, they have done some decent things. Unfortunately, there's always a big push in the UN, led by the United States and the Western European nations, to push abortion and gay rights and that kind of thing. And it so happens that a good friend of mine by the name of Austin Roos runs something called CFAM, CFAM, which is an NGO that lobbies at the UN against that kind of stuff. And the Holy See has played a big part traditionally in organizing coalitions of smaller countries to torpedo those sorts of things when they can. It's a fascinating study. I mean, it's easy to discount it as, a bunch of one-worlders. But the fact is they do a lot of stuff, both good and bad. And as with the United States government or the European Union, you want to encourage the good they do and try to fight the bad.
So the UN actually has a lobby. They're significant enough where they're being solicited.
Oh gosh, yes. The General Assembly, of course, is the biggest body, and that all the nations of the earth are represented in that. And then you've got the we should be saving this for UN Day in October. But anyway, the thing is that they have a whole bunch of subsidiary institutions like UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, that does a lot of good things in terms of preserving places of world heritage and that kind of thing, and some not so good things in terms of educating for gender equality and so on. I mean gender equality in quotation marks, of course. Then you've got the World Health Organization, you've got the Economic and, what is it? The Economic and Social Council. Anyway, in with and under these sorts of and the Food and Agriculture Organization. Now, UNESCO is based in Paris. The FAO is in Rome, in the old Italian Ministry of the Colonies, you'll be happy to know, built by Mussolini. It looks like it. It's got that Mussolini architecture, which I know always makes you very proud when you see it. So, rumor has it that the Tumble House Tower was inspired by Mussolini's Ministry for the Colonies. I don't know if that's really what the architects were thinking of when they built it, but I could see it. Looking at the two buildings side by side, I could imagine, that sort of heroic frieze you've got when you come into the Tumblr House lobby. It does remind one of the sort of fascist realist school. Anyway, I digress.
Anyway,
so the thing is that all of this stuff going on, it's a really mixed bag, not unlike the federal government. And there are good things, there are bad things. The Knights of Malta are represented there as a sovereign organization. It does have a lot of interesting things going on.
Very good. I didn't know we were going to head so far in this direction when we...
I certainly didn't plan to.
When we started the show with the adjective insular, I think people were expecting a different direction, perhaps.
Oh, a different direction. A different island, perhaps?
A different island, yes.
Well, all right, how about one that begins with M like Manhattan, but isn't Manhattan?
We're getting warmer.
Okay, Mallorca.
That's very clever. Okay, yeah, no, Mallorca being where Saint Junipero Serra is from.
And Blessed Raymond Lull, yes.
We're getting closer, but not quite.
Minorca?
This is... No, not Minorca, not Malaysia.
Mull.
What?
Okay, Mull, the island of Mull in the Hebrides.
No, not Madagascar.
No? Oh, Mauritius in the Indian Ocean.
Is that a place?
Yes.
Madeira.
Oh, Madeira. Wonderful wine, delicious.
Oh, good.
It's a fortified wine like port or sherry. Madeira.
Excellent.
And when I was there this last weekend, I had at least one glass of Madeira every day.
Awesome.
But I was actually there not purely to drink Madeira, but for a much more elevated reason. It was the centennial of Blessed Emperor Charles, Kaiser Karl. On April 1st, he died that day. And I have to tell you, all joking aside, it was truly one of the greatest experiences of a life. It's had a lot of them. I gathered an envelope of intentions from various people. And on Thursday, the 31st of March, I went up to the Monte, where the church is where Blessed Carl is enshrined. And they had it was behind a locked gate, tons of flowers, but a locked gate. So I took that envelope and I threw it over the gate right into the flowers. So it was gone the next day, but anyway, the intentions got there, so that's what counts. That was wonderful, actually. And that night, they had a rosary in the Jesuit church of Funchal, the town under the Monte. Beautiful. All the churches I went into, beautiful Portuguese Baroque, just really, really gorgeous. And then that night there was a concert put on by the Hungarian consulate in commemorating Blessed Carl. The day itself, there was a solemn mass in the cathedral at Funchal, which was lovely, and they had amongst other things, a group of South Tyrolean from what's now Italy. South Tyrolean Schutzen led the procession into the mass. Members of the family and various other folk involved did the readings and gave the the bidding prayers. It was really, it was the fulfillment of a life's dream to get there. And of course, the rosary was at the after the cathedral. There was a lunch at the Jesuit college, which was quite nice. And then we all took off for the Monte again. And there we had a holy hour and benediction, which was really wonderful. I mean, just really, really a tremendous event. And afterwards, I rode a toboggan down the hill, which was another kind of experience, but it was also a lot of fun. And then the following day, because one of the attendees, there were Suzanne Pearson, the head of the American head of the Gebetsliga, Father Jordan, who's her co-chair, her sister, a lot of interesting people there. Some I already knew, some I hadn't met before. But Father Benedict Keeley, he's a priest of the Ordinariate in England, and he runs an aid organization for the embattled Christians of the Near East. But he offered the Ordinariate Mass the following day at the Monte, and that was for me very touching, because, as you know, the Ordinariate Mass, because of my experience with Anglo-Catholics and all that, it has a very deep meaning for me. And the last place I would have thought to have assisted at one would be by Kaiser Karl's shrine. But over the high altar is the miraculous image of Our Lady of the Mount, which Kaiser Karl used to pray to very assiduously. He's here, Kaiser Karl, I mean, and they have a Blessed Sacrament chapel with a huge tabernacle. It's really lovely. And then the high altar there, and there was that wonderful Ordinariate Mass going on. And I'll tell you, I thought I was in seventh heaven. It was wonderful. The island itself is very picturesque, very beautiful. But I can tell you that the Monte, where the church is, very different from the town below. And you can see why he caught pneumonia, because it's misty and rainy and all that. It's a microclimate, because literally you're 15 minutes away from heat. And I also went to Reed's Hotel, where the family stayed when they went there initially. Famous old place, beautiful hotel. And so I really enjoyed Madeira in all respects, and the food was excellent and inexpensive. So even at Reed's, which is probably the most exclusive place on the island, it's not very expensive. I don't know how much it is to stay there, but the menu is very reasonable. So it was great. Mind you, there was no UN presence.
Wow. What an oversight.
Well, you would have thought there would have been a United Nations honor guard or something. That, of course, was the one thing missing from the centennial. When you figure that Kaiser Karl's death came about because the Allied nations, the United States, Britain, France, and Italy, stuck him there without any money. And when you consider that and wouldn't allow his various supporters to send him any, and when you consider the role that Thomas Masaryk in Czechoslovakia, the filthy scumbag Karl Renner in Austria, and Admiral Horthy in Hungary played in ruining him. What would have been good, and to say nothing also of his German allies, ruining both him and themselves by refusing to listen to him. One can only say that for the thing to have been completely appropriate, there should have been representatives in the governments of each of those nations making reparation at his shrine for the terrible injustice they did to him. But who knows, maybe on the 125th or the 150th. But I won't be around for the 125th even. 25 years from now, think of it, I could do this. I don't need help. I can. I would be 86 if I'm still alive.
You can do it.
I'll tell you what, I'll do it on the proviso that those governments, not a lousy representative, but the president of each of them, well, not the Queen, but the King, but the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and all the presidents involved, throw themselves and beg for mercy on the shrine.
You'll stay alive for that?
No, if they'll do that, I'll stick around. I want to see that. Actually, there were a number of people at various times who have suspected that the reason why the history of Central Europe in particular and Europe in general has been so awful since his death is as a punishment for it. I don't know if that's true, but I certainly would be the last one to deny it. Anyhow, it was wonderful to be there. It was wonderful to see the Habsburgs en masse. Really, really great bunch of people. They're not the Kennedys, but we can't all be cursed. What?
You gotta watch when you. Yeah, they're not the Kennedys, Charles. Very true.
No, they're not the Kennedys. I mean, and the Kennedys, as Teddy once said, are our brightest and best. We don't need those stinking Habsburgs. We got ourselves Kennedys and Rockefellers and Clintons and Bushes.
That's right. Okay.
Roosevelt's.
Anything else before we move on?
Well, yes. It's important to remember, thinking of the empire and all that we are beginning Holy Week. And some of the people listening to this will be very lucky and be able to enjoy the pre-55 rites of Holy Week. When you do, remember that on Good Friday and Holy Saturday, if you've got an old enough missal, there were the prayers for the emperor. And although those were originally for the Holy Roman Emperor, they were said for the emperors of Austria as well. And Blessed Emperor Charles, for the Easters of 1917 and 18, was the last man to be the official recipient of those prayers, the official beneficiary.
Wow.
And Maundy Thursday, the foot washing was a big, big ceremony, not just for the emperors of Austria, but for the kings of Spain and France and Portugal and Naples and Poland, and Bavaria and Saxony and all sorts of Catholic places. Even Great Britain, the Catholic King of England, the Catholic King, and the kings of Scotland did the foot washing. And today, the only remnant in all of Europe, because you see, Maundy Thursday, amongst other things, theologically speaking, saw the union of the Davidic kingship of Christ with the communio of the church. And so from that time forward, it was considered that every Catholic monarch participated in the kingship of Christ, which is why the foot washing on Maundy Thursday was such a big deal for them. But the only remnant of that today is, of all people, Queen Elizabeth, who doesn't do the foot washing, but still does the accompanying banquet and giving out of money, which was also done. So it's kind of funny that of this quintessentially Catholic rite, only the Queen of Great Britain still does it.
Wow.
Pretty bizarre, huh?
Life is a strange place in which to live.
That's what Ed Wood told us, and he showed the way. So now I guess that's all I've got to say. Although, the funny thing is that not a single one historically from Portugal to Poland and from Norway and Sweden to Naples, no king that did the foot washing, no Catholic monarch that did the foot washing, ever did so with the assistance of UN peacekeeping troops.
Imagine that. What an absurd image.
It didn't happen. They weren't there. And the Secretary General of the United Nations to this day doesn't do the foot washing.
Let's pretend that he did.
Yes.
Let's pretend that we had a very Catholic one and that he actually did that. Would anything happen? Would there be repercussions?
Oh, yeah, he'd be out of a job. You bet. But see, one thing that would make it unlikely, though, is that you got to remember that the Secretary General of the UN is, if you look at the United Nations, it's like a government of sorts. The Secretary General is like the head of government, like the Prime Minister or the Chancellor or the Premier. The Security Council is like the upper house of Parliament or the legislature. The General Assembly is like the lower house. And the different subsidiary organizations like different branches, different offices in the government. But you know what the United Nations lacks? It has all that other stuff, but it lacks one thing.
Judiciary?
Oh no, the World Court in The Hague. No, they definitely
really?
have a judiciary.
Wow. Okay. I have no idea.
Well, apart from the fact that they don't have a standing army, they've got to put together the peacekeeping forces on an ad hoc basis from, member states who offer. They also, there is a central bank that the United Nations has, the World Bank, but they can't impose taxes. No standing army, no taxes. They don't have, Interpol is not quite a world police force. But the biggest thing they lack is a head of state.
Wow.
Suddenly I feel like the Wizard of Oz. I can see the Secretary General coming and saying, the lion doesn't have a heart, and the woodman, the lion doesn't have courage, the woodman doesn't have a heart, the scarecrow doesn't have a brain, the UN doesn't have a head of state, and the Wizard of Oz saying, the Wizard of Oz saying, well, my friend, you may lack a head of state, but you have one thing that the others lack. And then the Wizard of Oz would proceed to give the United Nations a world head of state, a world president or monarch or something.
Wow. That's
Is that a picture?
I don't.
seeing Dag Hammarskjöld in line with the other three with the Wizard of Oz.
That's a scary thought. I never thought of it in that manner. Like that's the one thing they lacked, and then that's like the New World Order.
Well, yes, but see, the Wizard of Oz could give them a head of state, but remember, he never gave nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have, and cause never was the reason for the evening or the Tropic of Sir Galahad.
Wait, what? You lost me now.
Well, no, I mean those are lyrics. I quote again. This is from the song Tin Man by America back in the 70s, and I quote, "But Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have, and cause never was the reason for the evening or the Tropic of Sir Galahad."
Wow. Yeah. No. On listening to it again, it just I
What?
don't think I could absorb it because it was so profound. It's just like went over
All
my
right,
head.
all right, here it is. We'll try one more time, just for you.
Okay.
Now listen carefully.
All
This is
right.
very important. Oh, Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have, and cause never was the reason for the evening or the Tropic of Sir Galahad.
What's the Tropic of Sir Galahad?
Why do you ask those questions?
So the Tin Man always had a heart? Yeah, he didn't like the Wizard of Oz give him like a certificate or something?
No, he gave the certificate to he gave the degree to the Scarecrow,
Oh, that's
and he
right.
gave the medal to the Cowardly Lion, but he gave the heart-shaped clock to the Tin Man.
I see.
And then he gave what's her face,
Dorothy. Oh.
Nancy Pelosi to the Secretary General of the UN.
Wait, the Wizard of Oz gave Nancy Pelosi to the Secretary General of the UN
Well,
as
yeah,
a
well, the
gift?
Secretary General, well, as head of state for the world.
Oh, let's not do that. Let's not go there.
Okay,
Stop it, Charles.
would you rather he gave Pope Francis?
Just I don't want him to give anyone to I don't want him to give anyone to the UN.
As head of state, we have to have a head of state to fit at the apex of world order.
I don't who's the best person for head of state for the New World Order? I don't know.
Well, what's his face? Gates.
Bill Gates?
Yeah. Or Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. That is not so bad. Not so bad.
Is that okay?
I'm a little bit in favor of that because that is a perfect segue into the memes of production.
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. Yes, Elon Musk, turns out he's not such a bad guy. He tweeted out recently, seize the memes of production. So he
stole that from us, and you know where?
Yeah, I do.
He stole it at the Christmas party.
That's right.
You remember he was there with Lydia from the secretarial poll under the mistletoe, and he was pumping her for quotable quotes.
Yep. But imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So.
Yeah, well, that's what you say. I think it was sheer plagiarism, theft. And if you had guts, you would sue him in the World Court. You'd take him all the way to The Hague. That's right.
Does it even work like that? Like, what kind of cases go there?
Oh, shoplifting, jaywalking.
Like what cases are they settling and for who?
Well, all right. Let's say, for instance, old Rose got sick and tired of the hours she was working for you, right? And so she takes you in front of the Labor Relations Board. And she doesn't like the result because they find, half of them are in your pocket, so they fine for you. So she appeals to the World Court in The Hague.
But
that's actually not how it works at all.
Yeah, that I was gonna say. I feel like California would be slightly upset, and the United States would be slightly upset because that would be infringing on our sovereignty a little bit.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
just like
No, countries take other countries to court.
Okay, that's interesting.
In lieu of fighting over something.
Interesting.
And then, of course, see again, unfortunately or otherwise, fortunately or unfortunately, the World Court, it's difficult for it to enforce its decisions, although it does sometimes. There's a World Criminal Court as well that will try individuals for war crimes and things like that.
Huh. Okay.
But the United States are not, I think, a party to that treaty.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point because, like, let's say United States was battling with, I don't know, anybody, Mexico over an issue, and then they went and Mexico took something to the World Court.
Yeah.
The World Court found United States totally guilty, imposes some sort of penalty. I mean, what would the United States? Like, could the United States just say no? Are there or would there be consequences?
It could say no, but we'd look very bad.
Have countries said no? I mean, have there been things where the World Court has ruled on something, and a country's like, you know what, you don't even matter?
Yeah, they have. But see, they're not as invested in it as the United States are. You see, the thing is, the World Court, the World Court actually predates the United Nations, although it's been absorbed. It was actually founded at the aegis of all people of Tsar Nicholas II in the 1890s, who was not happy about various wars that were going on at the time. They were small wars, but they kept on going on, and he didn't like the idea. So he got together with several of the other countries, and they founded the World Court. And again, it did prevent some disputes, not all, but some. Obviously, it didn't prevent 1914. But it's been around a long time, and after the the problem is that when a country such as our own has committed itself to the United Nations Charter, to refuse to go along with it could make you look really bad. And you got to bear in mind that in origin, what the United Nations were the just the nations that fought the Axis in World War II. In 1944, the Allies called themselves the United Nations. And then the idea was, because remember, the League of Nations had been founded in the wake of World War I. So they decided, gee, it didn't work. Let's turn these United Nations into a world organization that will have teeth and will work. So the UN actually absorbed the bits and pieces that were still left, various agencies and all that, of the League of Nations. And that's why, although the major UN headquarters is in New York, one of their major offices is the old Palace of Nations, the old League of Nations building in Geneva, Switzerland. And here in Vienna, they've got a similar setup, only it's quite new. I'd really like to see the Palais des Nations in Geneva because, from what I've seen, it's beautiful, Art Deco, and just gorgeous. But the one here in Vienna is ugly as all hell, modern architecture.
I see.
So you've gotten more about the UN tonight than in your entire life.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to know.
And one of the things I like about Dag Hammarskjöld is that he helped set the mission of the UN. He said, and I quote, "Somewhere over the rainbow, Bluebirds fly.
Oh, that's embarrassing. That's
What?
embarrassing.
What? Why do you think he ended up going to the Wizard to get a head of state?
Ah, that's embarrassing. Okay, so he... Okay, Charles, you got me. So...
All right, let's get on with this. Enough of this UN falderall. I don't know why you're such a Dag Hammarskjöld fan anyway. Nobody's heard of him.
That's for sure. All right. More. So, let's move on with the memes production. A lot of comments from people. Don from Florida says, he has a question. He says, does poor old Rose and Mavis from the commissary play canasta to pass the time away at Tumbler Tower?
They sure do. They sure do. When they get a little bit tipsy, they play Bolivia. They go real wild.
All right, well, Andrew from New Jersey, by way of Long Island, in parentheses, Connecticut Respecter, says...
See the tie? Bought at the second-hand shop run by the First Congregational Church in Kent, Connecticut.
So he says, the reason you don't see old Rose anymore is because Vinny has her cleaning up on the 13th floor.
Where?
He says the 13th floor.
Oh, the 13th floor. Did I ever tell you the last time I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
Old Rose is cleaning up the 13th floor?
Oh, yes, the 13th floor. That's right. What I was going to tell you is that what were we talking about?
Don from Florida was reprimanding you. He says, Charles spent 25 minutes on Connecticut and completely neglects the great pizza enclave of New Haven?
I didn't mention the Powder Day celebrations either in New Haven. I didn't talk about their 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 churches on New Haven Green. I didn't talk about my favorite bar there, the Ordinary, which is also on the Green. And I didn't sing the Whiffenpoof song.
What's a Whiffenpoof song?
It's the song of the Whiffenpoofs. They are a glee club of sorts at Yale. And that song, your brother, Kirk Mulhern, Mike Dykes, and all the other drones and myself used to sing. It was our theme song. And it came from the Whiffenpoofs at Yale University. I didn't say anything about the Yale University Museum of British Art, did I? No, not a word. Or my favorite Chinese restaurant in New Haven, which serves up water beef.
I feel like you're hugely negligent about your Connecticut overview. Then, how do you not even say your favorite bar?
Oh, I could have gone on and on. I could have talked about the Curtis House, the oldest inn in Connecticut, which I really love. It's got another name now. It's changed since then.
Is that the haunted one?
Yes. I could have talked about Samuel Seabury. I could have done all kinds of things, but I didn't.
All right.
I could have spoken about Moses Dunbar, who was the brave loyalist who was hanged unjustly by the rebels during the Revolution.
All right.
I could have spoken about Nathan Hale, who claimed he had only one life to give for his country, and he did.
All right.
I could have talked about Benedict Arnold, who's a native of Connecticut, and how I stumbled onto his grave in London.
Wow. All right, Charles. You could have talked about a lot of things. Let's move on.
Did I ever tell you about the Tin Man?
All right. Don from Florida also says, Cincinnati chili is a culinary travesty beyond measure.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. Gloves are off. Gloves are off. All right. First, I've got to, particularly because our longtime fan and listener Eric Darple wrote me a long defense of Cincinnati this week. pointing out how delicious Cincinnati chili is, number one. Number two, that it's only a symbol of the greater richness of Cincinnati culture. Now, you laugh all you like, but he pointed out, for instance, the formerly German neighborhood of Over the Rhine in Cincinnati, to say, and I myself can tell you that they've got a tremendous art museum there. So, you anti-Cincinnati people out there, I'm sticking with Cincy.
Okay,
Over the Rhine.
Fine, you guys win. Cincinnati chili is representative of Cincinnati and the greatness and beauty of Cincinnati.
It is. And let me tell you something else. The chocolate and cinnamon that everybody makes fun of, it's got chocolate in it. Well, you ever have chicken mole, smart guy? That's got chocolate too, and you would never know it, and it's delicious. You like chocolate mole, don't you? Chicken mole, Ron?
All right, we're going to move on.
Have you ever had a chicken mole pizza? I haven't.
All right, Susanna says, after
Don't you cry for me.
Well, I knew that one was coming.
Yeah, predictable sometimes.
After listening to Charles talk about fried ravioli and Cincinnati chili, I feel the need to stand up for a Southern staple, the banana peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwich.
Wow. But I've got to look that up. I mean, that sounds like something a pregnant lady would eat. But let me see. Banana,
peanut butter and mayonnaise. I feel like if you're gonna go that route, I feel like marshmallows would be better than mayonnaise. Mayonnaise, I feel like that's. I don't know, man. This is pretty weird, but I guess
it is. No, it's a thing. Wow. It is a thing. Let's see. Where do they generally eat this stuff? Is it a Southern thing? Yes, it is a Southern delicacy.
Of course it's yes.
It's a delicacy with a storied past. Apparently, Elvis Presley was very fond of this stuff. What do you know in Charleston? Wow.
Sometimes referred to as an Elvis sandwich?
Well, he loved them apparently. He loved.
Oh, I don't see mayonnaise on the thing that I'm looking up. Okay.
Oh, I'm seeing mayonnaise.
Oh, okay.
It's yeah. It.
If someone presented the sandwich to you, Charles, would you eat the sandwich? You paused. Susanna feels totally disrespected.
All right. Hold on. This guy, whoever this person is somebody, Freddie Campion, in 2016 in GQ, no less. He did it, banana and mayonnaise. He says, to my surprise, it wasn't invented by Dale Earnhardt Jr. It turns out the banana and mayonnaise sandwich is a quote-unquote Southern delicacy with a storied history. In 2014, Nationals bullpen coach Matthew Lacroix even credited it with the team's 10-game winning streak. So there you go, smart guy. Preparation. Now, this doesn't have the peanut butter, so maybe that makes a difference. 1 whole sliced banana sandwiched between 2 slices of white wheat bread and a healthy coating of mayo. It says, how does it taste? Absolutely terrible. Texture-wise, it's a slimy, gooey mess, and there are no complementary flavors. You bite into it, and all you get is a strong hint of salty mayo, followed by the faint echo of banana, practically an eternity later. You'd think the sweet banana would be some relief from the bitter mayo, but instead, it's just a reminder that other better foods exist. And then you could be eating those instead of this garbage.
That's savage.
Would I eat it again? Not if you paid me. I would have happily licked a subway seat if it meant getting the taste out of my mouth. Gee, I think he was somewhat disappointed. Oh, there's got to be something positive about it.
All right, let Susanna. What?
Southern living. All right.
Okay.
Only Southerners know the right way to make this sandwich. Let me see. Where does Oh, okay. Here's that storied history. All right. It goes like this. Because they were imported, bananas were once a pricey luxury, but spread to the common man thanks to an enterprising businessman named Samuel Zemmour. In the book The Fish That Ate the Whale, The Life and Times of America's Banana King by Rich Cohen, we learn that Zemmour saw his first banana in Selma, Alabama. And so Zemmour was the one who invented the thing, and it spread throughout the South. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. What did she say, the rest of it?
All right, she said some people like it without the banana, but I feel banana gives it a sweetness that balances out the peanut butter and the mayo. Besides, it always makes me feel like I'm eating something vaguely nutritious. Mind you, this isn't an everyday sandwich. It's more of a I have a craving and this is the only thing that will satisfy sandwich.
Yeah, that does sound like pregnancy. But now it turns out it's called an Elvis sandwich because Elvis enjoyed them, but he liked his toasted or fried with bacon.
Okay, well, you can't go wrong with bacon.
No, in fact, if we'll split it. I'll take the bacon. You can have the rest. How's that?
That's kind of disrespectful to Susanna, in my humble opinion. But
all right, Susanna, I apologize for being disrespectful. You can get annoyed at Freddie Campion at GQ for being so mean. Also, though, to be fair, you notice there was no peanut butter in the version he ate. I could see where just marshmallow and banana would be kind of gross.
Yeah, as a kid, I used to have peanut butter and marshmallow sandwich.
I did too.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I liked that very much. We call them fluffernutters.
There you go. All right, it's been a lengthy memes of production because it was sort of littered and sprinkled with factoids, fun factoids about the UN.
UN peacekeeping.
But all right, it's that time for State of the Week.
Oh, confusion, hysteria, doubt.
All right, the State of the Week for this week is Vermont.
Oh, Vermont. There's a state I love, despite its abysmal voting record. Vermont is wonderful. First and foremost, its history is kind of weird because the governors of the colonies of New York and New Hampshire thought it would be fun. They both claimed it. And so they sold a lot of property to incoming colonists from New York and New Hampshire. The problem was they sold the same places.
Oh.
Yeah. So the Yorkers, as the New York natives were called, and the Hampshire Grantmen from New Hampshire found themselves settling in the same places that had been, in other words, they'd been, a con is such a terrible thing. But at any rate, this led to fighting. And the Hampshire Grants people, they eventually became the Green Mountain Boys, led by a man named Ethan Allen, who would later make a fortune in furniture. He had a whole chain of furniture stores around the country.
Wow.
No, he did not.
Oh,
no?
He was named.
No, okay. It was named after him, but he had nothing to do with it. Don't believe everything you're told.
Oh.
But Ethan Allen, as I say, Vermont was in a state of partial civil war before the revolution began, and it was not quite clear to which colony it belonged anyway. So at the beginning of the war, Ethan Allen joined the rebels with his Green Mountain Boys, and they seized Fort Ticonderoga in New York. and that artillery was taken by General Knox all the way to Boston and used to drive the British out. But Ethan Allen decided that Vermont would go it alone, and they became an independent republic or the British Empire. And so they were until 1791, when they joined the United States and became the 14th state. But they've got a really an amazing history. The Yankees that settled, there was a sort of, well, the town of Arlington, Vermont was called Torrey Hollow. And to this day, it has the oldest Episcopal church in the state. The famous Justin Morgan horse was started in Vermont by a man named Justin Morgan. Vermont's big, how would you say, the most famous crop is maple syrup. Vermont maple syrup is the envy of New England. Now you're probably wondering, well, that's all nice, but what can I go see? What can I do in Vermont? Well, I'll tell you. First and foremost, Lake Champlain on the western side of the state, separating Vermont from New York. All sorts of inlets, a beautiful, beautiful state. Beautiful lake, rumored to have its own version of the Loch Ness Monster, Champy. And on that beautiful lake is the biggest city in Vermont, Burlington. And next to Burlington, a wonderful, beautiful, paradisical place called Winooski. And Winooski is wonderful because even to this day, it is primarily inhabited by French Canadians. And there are, in fact, a lot of French Canadians in Vermont. Not too far from there is a town called St. Albans. St. Albans is a charming, cute little New England town like most of Vermont is. But it has the added interest of being the furthest northern battle of the American Second Civil War. Because what happened was a group of Confederate agents went all the way to Canada and then crossed over the border and attacked the town to rob the bank. So that was the furthest northern battle of the Civil War. Not Gettysburg, but St. Albans. In the southern part of the state, there's a lot to see. Bennington as the battlefield. It also has the burial place of the great poet Robert Frost, and one or two of his houses are around there. In Windsor, Vermont, is the old Constitution House, which is where the Republic of Vermont drafted its constitution. The capital is called Montpelier, I would say, but they pronounce it Montpelier, which is a very little state capital, and it has a small but beautiful Capitol building. The Catholic Cathedral of the diocese is in Burlington. Let me see, what else can I tell you about Vermont? It's French Canadians, Irish, and Old Yankees. And the northeastern part of it is called the Kingdom. And in the southwestern area are 3 ghost towns, the one of which I remember, it's called Glastonbury. And that area is also called the Bennington Triangle because the numbers of weird disappearances that have taken place. Passing strange, as we say in New England. And that is Vermont.
Yeah, I'm kind of browsing on Google Maps and doing the street views of the states whenever you're talking about them. Going through all these towns, the main street, they all look like Old Town Monrovia, but nicer and more authentic.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what they are. And that's why Old Town Monrovia is always used for movies, because you can pretend it's anywhere in the country, especially New England, without having to go anywhere. But yeah, you're seeing little towns in Vermont. They all have the Congregational Church. They're all Norman Rockwell-esque.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
And I love Vermont. It's a wonderful place. The only thing wrong with it is its government, its politicians. But then that's true of so many places, it's almost hardly worth saying.
Isn't Bernie the senator for that state?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they've had some other real winners come out of Vermont. I mean, it's... Although it used to be a solidly Republican state. The old Yankees were notoriously Republican. And in fact, it used to be said, back in the day when the winning candidates always carried Vermont, it used to be said, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. But in the election of 1936, Alf Landon, the Republican candidate, won only 2 states. He lost even his home state of Kansas to FDR in FDR's second election. He only carried Maine and Vermont. And so FDR said, as Maine goes, so goes Vermont. And he obviously was somewhat unimpressed.
I think part of you is really amused by FDR.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't help but be. I mean, a man who was, on the one hand, that close to a dictator, but on the other hand, really enjoyed self-parody. It's hard. I guess you could say that on a political level, I despise the man.
Yeah.
On a moral level, I think he was disgusting. On a social level, I might very well have enjoyed his company.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, I mean, he did things that were so out of character for a real monomaniac. You know, I mean, I think I told you he never carried either his hometown or the town of Rhinebeck across the river. Now, this is one of my favorite FDR stories, and it's why I have a sort of sneaking, I can't call it an admiration, maybe, and not even an affection, but whatever it is. When he got polio, he was out of politics for almost a decade, but he wasn't idle. Instead, he dedicated his time to the Holland Society, which is the organization of descendants of the native Dutch settlers of New Netherland today. You know, it's a hereditary society. Well, it so happened that they had a project of surveying all of the surviving Dutch structures in the Hudson Valley, from Manhattan to Albany and beyond. And he was very, very closely involved with that. They cataloged them and photographed them and all, and there are quite a few of them left. So he was very proud of being Knickerbocker Dutch, as they say. Now, a lot of the people in the valley are still of that descent, both where Hyde Park, where he lived, and across the river, as I say, the town of Rhinebeck. Now, the reason why Rhinebeck comes into the story is because there's a hotel there called the Beekman Arms that goes back to colonial days, and he would always start his political campaigns at the Beekman Arms. But he never carried Rhinebeck, and he never carried his own hometown of Hyde Park. All right. Well, they were going to have a new post office put into Rhinebeck when he was president. And it was pretty ugly. So the town fathers appealed to him as president of the United States, as a fellow Knickerbocker Dutchman. And they said, look, we don't agree with you politically. We've never voted for you. We probably never will. But we appeal to you as a fellow Knickerbocker Dutchman to stop this horror from being built and to order the post office to build something more in keeping with our architecture. And he did. So the post office they have in Rhinebeck to this day is a beautiful Dutch colonial structure. But then he thought about it and he said, you know, this is true of the entire Hudson Valley. So he issued an executive order that any further federal buildings, especially post offices, would be built in accordance with Dutch colonial. But then he thought, you know, every part of this country has a vernacular style proper to it. So he issued another executive order that post offices had to be built in accordance with local styles, whatever they were. And that's a nice thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it's like I've never heard or thought of a law or an order like that before, where you're sort of mandating a style. What's like? I mean, like, does Arcadia Post Office have a style?
It does. 60s modern.
I see.
Well, see, the thing was that executive order was rescinded under Truman, I think.
Oh, I see.
And the Arcadia Post Office was built under Kennedy.
I see. You know where I went to? It has a beautiful post office, one of the nicest ones. Actually, I thought it was both Santa Barbara and Ojai. I think they might both have like absolutely gorgeous post offices.
Oh, they really do. And that, going back to FDR for a minute, I much as I say, loathe him politically, the WPA and the PWA, the Works Progress Administration and the Public Works Administration, built a huge number of really beautiful buildings around the country. And the WPA artists painted a lot of gorgeous murals. There was one in the Monrovia post office that was later taken out and is now in the Monrovia City Hall. It's very beautiful. Because what they did was they gave jobs to unemployed, of whom there were a lot, artists and so on. That's where the Writer's Guide, the American Guide series came from the Federal Writers Project of the WPA. My running gag, of course, is that all the rest of the New Deal was from Satan, but the Federal Writers Project was good because I could have gotten a job with it.
Of course. Of course.
My ideals are not for sale, but they do rent at reasonable rates.
All right. This is officially the latest we've ever started questions on an episode ever. We are at we're over an hour.
Heavens to Betsy, let's get moving.
Yes. Okay. The first question is from Susanna.
Susanna.
Exactly. She says, I once heard that when you enter a church while Mass is going on, you don't have to genuflect before taking your seat. Rather, it is more appropriate to bow to the altar. I can't remember where I've heard this, but I know someone told me this once when I was going through RCIA as a convert. Is this true, or should you always genuflect? Vincent, please ask Charles if he knows anything about this, and if he does, ask him to tell us. Charles, do you know anything about this?
No, I've never heard of that at all. You genuflect when you get into the pew, you genuflect when you get out, and you genuflect whenever you pass the tabernacle.
I feel like these guys are playing games because they just want to avoid kneeling and genuflecting, and it's like the...
Well, I understand. I'm old too, and my knees are bothering me. So I can see why council wouldn't want to kneel. I wouldn't want to genuflect. I understand that.
Not to be confused with Susanna.
No. Susan of the parish council is no relation to Susanna. Susan is a cradle Catholic. She's even older than I am. She's a real Catholic. She was playing the guitar in 1968 in the choir. But now, mind you, if the tabernacle is not on the altar, if it's been hidden away somewhere, if it's in a separate chapel, then you do bow to the crucifix over the altar.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Let's see. So we have a very excellent question from Don from Florida. This is an excellent question, very well thought out, very well worded. And thank you for submitting this, Don from Florida.
I don't know all right, it's me to sound like a put-up job, but go ahead.
San Giuseppe, adopted by the good people of Italy. St. Thomas Aquinas, born in the Lazio region of the Kingdom of Sicily. St. Gregory the Great, and St. Francis of Rome, and finally St. Benedict of Norcia, the terror of demons, and earthly father of our Lord Jesus Christ, 2 doctors of the church, a mystic, and the patron saint of Europe and father of Western monasticism, all celebrate their feast days in the month of March. So what are we doing celebrating Irish heritage in March for the Roman British St. Patrick? I want to reclaim the month of March for these great Italian saints. After all, we have far more to offer culturally than Jameson and cabbage, and no one ever made drunken fools of themselves eating pizza, fish, pasta, breads, cannolis, and St. Joseph's pastries. Are you with me, Don Vincenzo? Absolutely. I am on board, Don from Florida.
Okay, number one, they have gotten plastered on Dago Red.
Dago Red.
Yeah, Dago Red. And don't pretend you don't know what that is. Big, fat bottles of Chianti with straw. To be fair, they're very useful as candle holders afterwards. So I can't really be too dismissive of Dago Red bottles. But are you seriously going to tell me you haven't seen people get drunk at Italian gatherings off Dago Red?
Are you seriously going to tell me that you're going to put St. Joseph and St. Thomas Aquinas and all these other wonderful saints below St. Patrick? Wow.
I didn't say I wouldn't put him below. I wouldn't put him below. Also, though, I have to find fault with attacking Jameson's and corned beef and cabbage, both of which I'm very fond of. Although I also enjoy Dago Red, and therein lies the answer to Don's problem. You see, the state of the Union that has fixed this problem most perfectly is, of course, our most French state, Louisiana. They have developed a modus vivendi that's worked beautifully for a century and a half or two, maybe. It's very simple. They have a lot of mix and a lot of wops in Louisiana, especially in New Orleans. Lots of both. The St. Joseph table is so popular there that the blacks in New Orleans have picked it up. That's how popular St. Joseph's table is in New Orleans. St. Patrick's Day is an amazing celebration because they have all the mix in the Irish Channel. So, what happened? In Louisiana, St. Patrick's and St. Joseph's Day have almost merged. Yes, they actually have a couple of Irish-Italian parades where the two nationalities together march through the streets of New Orleans or Metairie, waving their respective flags, which look so similar that if you don't know the difference, you wouldn't be able to tell. The only difference, of course, being red versus orange. And if you're, a little weak on the eyes, you wouldn't notice. So, I mean, in Louisiana, the Irish and the Italians have merged those celebrations seamlessly. And given the French dominance of the state, I think it is a tribute to the way my people are able to help those of, other backgrounds. We bring harmony out of disunity and acrimony.
Yeah, the French people be like, all these other Irish and Italian saints, let's just lump them all together and just get their celebration out of the way, right? Am I right?
No, it's a way of honoring both equally.
Oh, okay.
And they have that way we can spend months and months in our Mardi Gras. But it's okay. I mean, from the Epiphany to Ash Wednesday, the stroke of midnight, that is the Mardi Gras season. But we figured the Irish and the Italians needed their time too. And so we merged their 2 days together, and they have a 3-day party. And I'm not kidding about the Irish-Italian parades. That's not a joke.
I know. All right, Charles.
See, there doesn't have to be conflict. As with the United Nations, you can bring people together. In fact, I suppose you could say that in a sense, the Irish-Italian parades are a kind of spiritual UN peacekeeping operation.
Yeah, let's merge the French saint celebrations with Spanish saint celebrations. How about we do that?
You
Let's just
can find a
merge.
place. You can find a place where there's enough Spanish with the French. Sure, have at it.
All right, Charles. Enjoy that one.
Here to help, always.
All right. Superfan Lorraine has a comment. She says, "Thank you, Charles, for telling the story of Little Rose. She has had a place in my heart since I was a wee one, since I'll be turning 70 next month. It's been a very long time. I visited her house twice when I was in my early 20s, and it was very moving, including having the experience of smelling roses when we walked through her room. There were no roses anywhere in the house, but it's one of those things that many people encounter in her home. Not everyone there could smell them, but it was a very intense odor to me, as if I had a big bouquet of them right under my nose. It was a bit of a wake-up call for me."
Yeah, I mean, she was an amazing lady, and as I said when we spoke about her earlier, she apparently had some sort of weird connection through Stigmatic Central or whatever with Teresa Neumann. But to this day, people report all sorts of interesting phenomena. A lot of prayers get answered. So again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're interested in Little Rose Ferrand, go to the Little Rose Ferrand Foundation online. You can find them easily enough, and they will give you all the information you can imagine about New England's own French-Canadian stigmatic.
Okay, back to Andrew from New Jersey by way of Long Island, in parentheses, Connecticut respecter. It's so ridiculous.
What? Are you disrespecting Long Island?
I am...
Could I remind you where your father was born?
I'm equally putting Long Island, Connecticut, and New Jersey in their own special place equally. How about that one?
Part of the burgeoning tri-state area.
Okay. He says, "Hello, gentlemen, and greetings from the Garden State. I have a few questions for Charles today. Number one, if Charles has not talked about it already, I would love to hear about his recent trip to Madeira and what he did while there. I was also...
Did that. Too late.
Too bad, so sad. I would also be interested in hearing about what Charles's impressions are of Madeira as a country. It's obviously a pilgrimage destination, but would it be a nice place to take a vacation as well? What's the climate like? Has it become woke like the rest of the West? Should we all sell our homes and move there to create a glad trad utopia?"
Well, it's a delightful place. The island is wonderful, as I mentioned earlier. I don't know that I'd want to live there, just because being on a small island in the middle of the Atlantic all the time would be a bit difficult.
What about as a vacation?
A vacation, definitely. I would not hesitate to go back. It's a delightful place. The people are very, very pleasant, and they've been a tourist spot for so long that they know how to deal with tourists in a very natural way. So okay. I would say, yeah, definitely.
All right. When Charles talks about his icons of American literature, he often cites names like Irving, Hawthorne, and Poe. But to my knowledge, he has never mentioned Herman Melville. What are Charles's thoughts on Melville as a writer, and would he recommend his novels? Why or why not?
Well, Melville was definitely a very fine writer. I'd recommend Moby Dick, definitely, and TP, I think, is one of them as well. Bartleby the Scrivener. Melville was a very fine writer. He doesn't grab me in the way the other three do, but I certainly enjoy his work. And of course, my father having been from New Bedford, Massachusetts, I've been to the Whaling Museum and the Seaman's Bethel, which is mentioned on Johnny Cake Hill, which is mentioned in Moby Dick. the whole whaling thing is very much a part of my dad's consciousness. In fact, the year he was born, he was very proud of the fact the last whaling ship put out of New Bedford, the Charles W. Morgan, which unfortunately was let go by the town fathers and picked up along with half of the rest of the New Bedford seaport by New London, Connecticut. Not that we're bitter or, annoyed or anything like that. But it's, fascinating writer, very New England, of course, and one of our first to gain any great fame outside the country.
Okay. Did you actually read all of Moby Dick?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's not my fault.
Andrew also says, I also don't think I have ever heard Charles speak about the Catholic American thinker and professor John Senior. I'd love to hear Charles's thoughts on Senior, especially in regards to his thoughts on the concept of wonder, his list of 1,000 good books, and even his own works, including The Death of Christian Culture. Stumbling upon him around the start of the pandemic, I couldn't believe that I had never heard of him before, and he seems like someone more Catholics should know about.
No, I agree with you 100%. I knew him somewhat, but I certainly endorse his writing and the sense of wonder. Yes, very much so. I never met him in the flesh. We spoke on the phone many, many times after my first book came out. And from about 87 until he died. Fascinating character. And, his medieval studies course at the University of Kansas, Lawrence, that he and a couple of other academics ran, produced a lot of very, very fine people in many, many different fields. A lot of converts. That's why it got shut down. Several vocations. It really, really a great fellow, and one of the best minds the Church in America ever produced. I knew his brother better, Harewood Sr., who was Canadian. He had gone up to Canada actually to fight in World War II in the RCAF. And he was a professor of history at McGill University in Montreal. Very fine monarchist, I must add. And he could speak not just the French of Paris, but he could speak Canadian French very beautifully, as the best people do. But no, a really remarkable family, all told. So, yeah, I agree with you. More Catholics should know about him.
Right. David has a question. He says, why do you think it's harder for men to be religious or hold the faith close in their lives? At most churches, women tend to be more present than men. Is it because women tend to be more inclined towards the spiritual stuff than men, or has the culture in the church in recent decades turned most men off from being truly Catholic men? Great question.
Yeah, I would say the latter. I would say that the two sexes, as with everything else, perceive religion in a very different way from each other. In keeping, and now, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to upset or offend anyone, but I'm going to fall back on stereotypical gender roles.
Oh.
I know, it's so awful. The truth of the matter is that women tend to be very nurturing and inward and soft and all that, and men are the opposite. And as a result, they have very different roles to play in the church. But there has been an ongoing feminization of the church. I saw Eric Sammons, I guess, my editor at Crisis Magazine, made a very funny but true comment on Twitter today, actually, which is altar girls are like birth control for vocations.
Mm.
And that's very true. That's very true. I mean, before the council, the liturgy was a very masculine thing. It was done by men. You had priests, you had altar boys. And that was it. You didn't see women running around the sanctuary. Now, it so happens that when a boy is 9, 11, 10, 12, which is usually when they begin to feel the stirrings of a vocation, if you want them to turn them off on anything, portray it as girly. You've lost them. But what if they're transgender? I don't know. What if I put a bullet through your brain? Leave me alone, woke.
Mm.
Okay, woke. As opposed to okay, boomer. Anyway. But okay, woker? What would be the form of address for a woke person? Okay, wokester?
I don't know.
Okay, wokette? Anyway. So the thing is that add to that the fact that when you have altar girls, you soon don't have altar boys, and the fact that Eucharistic ministerettes generally outnumber male Eucharistic ministers. You end up with a situation where Sunday after Sunday, boys that age see a scene where the only quasi-masculine actor in the sanctuary is the priest himself. I can't think of anything that would drive a healthy young man away from the vocation quicker, to say nothing of the church in general. But it goes on and on. I mean, what does the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre getting rid of the sword accolade in their entrance ceremonies, or forbidding the Knights of Columbus from drawing their swords at church, what does that do? What is that a sign of, except the ever-increasing effeminacy of the church? You know, we pray to the Virgin Mary as mother, as queen, not as boss.
Mm.
Similarly, we don't pray to St. George or St. Michael as dragon nurturers. And you know, one of the things I love about Blessed Carl and Servant of God Zita is that they were, the two of them, so respectively masculine and feminine.
Mm.
Zita was tough as nails, but every inch a woman. And her role was very, very feminine. She was a wife, she was a mother, a tough mother, but a mother. And Carl was very much a father and a soldier.
Yeah.
I guess.
You know.
So I was just going to say, I guess one of the things that has attracted me very much to Blessed Carl, and I think attracts a lot of other people, is that he is a saint for men.
Yeah.
It's like the Italian fellow, Blessed Pierluigi Frassati, is another one like that.
This is one of my favorite topics. You've got masculine and feminine spirituality and the different approaches. Like an example of feminine spirituality is the Magnificat, because if you think about it, it's taking God into you. And it's a relation to you. Whereas prayer is more like the Our Father, where you're saying, this is that, at things, and asking for things. It's kind of being direct. So it's interesting, the different approaches, and that there is such a thing as, masculine spirituality, feminine spirituality. The most, I feel like one of the reasons that we're losing the men big time is because Gosh, this is so cliche. I'm kind of embarrassed actually, but it's because of the Jesuits. It's honestly because of the Jesuits, because Ignatian spirituality is outright masculine. It's funny because I read the spiritual exercises, like as an example, I read spiritual exercises of Saint Ignatius, and it spoke to me so much, like wow. And I showed my mom.
Well, he was a soldier. I mean, what do you want?
Yeah, of course. But it means nothing to to women, that kind. And of course, in that same vein, that's why there's no sisters. This is why there's no Jesuit sisters, because that's not a feminine approach.
Well, Father James Martin comes close.
Exactly. So I felt like the Jesuits were the banner carriers in that regard. I mean, you could argue maybe not, but I felt like they probably had played a big role. And whereas with feminine spirituality, I see a lot of people flocking to Saint Therese. The Carmelites are just swooping up so many girls because everyone wants to be like Saint Therese. There's such an appeal there. I do also want to touch upon something that Solange Hertz said. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an interesting talking point, where she actually classified women as the, quote, more spiritual sex. How do you feel about that?
Well, in the sense that they're the more introspective and the more analytical, I could see that.
Yeah.
Because, men tend really to live in the moment.
Interesting.
And we tend to be a lot more simple in a lot of ways than women are.
Yeah.
Women will look at something and they'll take it apart and they'll meditate on it and on and on and on. Whereas men are much more doers. And I mean, we have a mutual friend, you and I, a lady who's a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was with her and some of our other friends at breakfast one day. And I observed this very point about women. They tend to analyze things much more than men will and all this. And she got very upset at me, and she said, oh, that's a stereotype and blah, 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 blah. All right, well, conversation goes on. And she's recounting an incident at school where she was definitely in the right. There's no way around it. And I told her so. I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I don't think anybody in his right mind could disagree with what you did. And she said, well, are you saying that as a friend? Are you saying that because of your knowledge of education? Are you saying it to console me? And she's going on like that. And then she stops and she looks at me and her eyes went wide. And she said, oh my God, I'm doing it, aren't I?
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, the two communicate differently. I remember when I was trying to send a message to a group of Catholic female writers, and my wife was editing my work. And I felt like I was being pretty straightforward, friendly, kind, nice. But she's like, oh, you can't say this because they'll think that.
Yep.
I said, well, I didn't say that. Oh, but they'll think that. I didn't say that at all. That wasn't my intention. You can please take my words at face value.
No.
So it was funny.
One of my favorite jokes along those lines, is about the couple who've been dating for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So the girl finally got sick of it. So the guy picks her up one evening to go out to the movies or something. And she says, I don't want to go to the movies. I don't want to do anything right now. Let me tell you something. We've been going out for 7 years. And he was one of these, good-looking, strong, silent types who didn't talk a lot. And she says, we never talk. I don't know where this relationship is, where we're going, or what, even if we have a relationship. I don't know what you think of me as. Your girlfriend, your fiance. I don't know what is going on in your head. And you know what? I don't want to do anything or go anywhere until you and I sit down and have a good long conversation about who we are as people, as individuals, as a couple, and where this relationship is going. And he looks at her in his way and he goes, well, darling, I've been thinking the same thing. 7 years is a long time. There's really nobody else I want to be with. So he reached into his pocket. He got a little box, went down on one knee, opened the box, there's an engagement ring in it. Will you marry me? And she looked at him and said, you don't call that a conversation, do you?
Oh, man.
There's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
And, which is fine. I mean, it's complimentary.
Yeah.
It's, not unlike the Irish-Italian parades, you need both sides to make the whole.
Wait, what did you just say?
I said, not unlike the Irish-Italian parades in Louisiana, I spoke about earlier. I mean, look, you've got these Irish-Italian parades, right? You've got Italians, you've got Irish. They parade together. They wave their flags. The Italians have their banners, and the Irish have theirs, and all this. And they parade together through the streets of New Orleans and Madeira and all that. And if you took out either one, it just wouldn't be the same.
So you're saying Irish celebrations are inherently incomplete and Italian celebrations are inherently incomplete when on their own?
No, I'm saying that celebration would be incomplete if you separated the two.
What, St. Joseph plus St. Patrick?
Yeah, the Irish-Italian celebrations, if you separate them, they wouldn't be what they are.
That's not true at all.
All right, let me put this another way. You and I have a show. If you took either of us out, it wouldn't be the same.
Okay, there we go.
You understand me?
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying like St. Joseph celebrations are inherently incomplete.
No. I'm saying if you took either the Irish or the Italians away from the Irish-Italian parade, you wouldn't have an Irish-Italian parade.
Okay, I thought you were trying to
be insulting.
Exert French dominance once more.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have to. It's already done. But the Irish-Italian parades would not be what they are, and they are delightful, actually, all kidding aside. They wouldn't be what they are if you took either side away.
I see.
Well, taking it even further and more deeply, male and female complement one another.
Yeah.
And humanity would not be what it is without either. But see, that's the problem we have today. We can't accept complementary. It's all about submission and dominance. And obviously, if you're not in charge...
And equality, to a fault, to be honest.
Equality. No such thing. Equality means my people are on top. Real freedom is the freedom to oppress others. If the story of the independence of countries since the 60s tells us nothing else, it's that. As soon as the colonial power leaves, the natives struggle for dominance, and whichever group comes on top smacks the others around. That's why we have such a great need for United Nations peacekeeping forces.
Absolutely. Yep.
You didn't think I was going to let a half hour go by on this episode without mentioning the UN peacekeeping?
Nope.
No, I didn't. There's the blue flag flying right here and now in the middle of this really deep question. You still see the UN flag.
You don't have a UN pin on today?
I do not. Well, I wasn't planning this. This all just came up out of nowhere.
Just out of sheer love of the UN. It just burst forth unbidden.
It's true. It's true.
Okay. All right. Fair enough, Charles. Yeah. Okay. Final question. Save the best for last. I'm really excited about this question because it's a very good one. Of
All right.
course, from Vendée Radio, who always asks
Go
very...
Vendée.
What?
Go Vendée.
Oh, yeah.
Go Vendée.
Yeah. He says, we often hear it said that there is little the laity can do about hireling bishops who are crucifying the church, except pray and maybe withhold donations. I have echoed...
That should not be a maybe.
I have echoed this argument myself, but the thought struck me that this may not be true. We all know the famous story of what the Orthodox Constantinopolitan laity did to the heresiarch Archbishop Nestorius. I'm being serious here. Why don't the Orthodox laity physically eject a Cardinal Marx, Supich, Casper, or Father Martin from their church the next time they openly preach heresy? We urgently need some kind of escalation of protest against our errant bishops. Sorry to say, but we glad-trad laity, too, are far too lukewarm. Heretical clergy should have fear of the zealous laity. Ooh, what say you, Charles?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
For sure.
Firstly, Nestorius, of course, very openly proclaimed his heresy. He said that Mary was not the mother of God. And that was really stupid in a city that loved Mary as much as Constantinople did. I mean, that would be like attacking St. Joseph in an Italian neighborhood.
Yeah.
It was really dumb. The other thing is that you got to bear in mind that Nestorius did not own the cathedral. The emperor did. He didn't. In most countries, the bishop owns everything. But that aside, you come to a problem, and that is the idea of one size fits all. That was a very rare occurrence. And it's interesting, for instance, even when St. Athanasius was preaching to his flock, he didn't urge them to throw out the Arian bishops who had usurped his property. But I understand your point. I mean, I certainly feel the push that way myself. Having said that, there you come into questions of proper hierarchy and all that. The thing is, if you upset the table like that, you break the thing. How soon or how easily can it be repaired? And also, I think that we tend to underestimate the power of the purse. You know, right now in New York, one of my favorite parishes up until now, St. Agnes, where I would regularly go to the Latin Mass when I was in town, they're just gotten rid of it. Now, the cream of the jest is that he's also put out a huge appeal for money for essential repairs to the church. Well, I'll tell you, about 20 years or so ago, the church burned. But because they were the home of the Tridentine Mass, they got a lot of money out of trads to help rebuild. That's not going to be there this time. So maybe fathers should have thought about that before asking for do re mate. However, if the parish fails, it's not that big a problem for the archdiocese because they're right by Grand Central Station. And I have no doubt that given that the Archdiocese of New York loves shutting down parishes on Manhattan and selling the property, I have no doubt that the current management are buying themselves a one-way ticket to oblivion.
When I had read this question for the first time, a lot of things jumped out at me. They're interesting. Absolutely. There's that desire for action that hits
action
you.
Action
now, yeah. But the other thing, ironically that hit me was, I think, something you said about the answer to, which was an answer, ironically, to, I think, another question from Vendée Radio. You're talking about the priest, the knight, and the peasant. And in this instance, we're talking about the peasants creating a fear in the priests. And there's something there where it's like, does the hierarchy need to enforce, from the top down? Is there something harmful when the laity is taking matters into their own hands? How important is it for the roles to be functioning properly and authority to be done in that manner?
Well, I mean, it's a tough call.
Is it sort of the same rules as kind of perhaps a vigilante, in our vigilante discussion, where if you're going to do this, you better make sure the good outweighs the bad and you're not creating something new?
Yeah, I would say. And this is the problem. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer to this thing, because there are a lot of historical examples either way. What I can tell you is that to take up the sword, as it were, or the broom handle against the clergy is fraught with peril, both spiritual and material. Many saints have said that no matter how bad they are, you can't smack them around, but that's not infallible. So I don't know.
There's something to be said about that too, in terms of having and developing this permanent watchdog attitude, where you're never out of the guard tower, and then that's sort of your permanent perspective on life. And I was talking about this with some other knights of in our council. I'm not sure if you one who actually passed away from COVID, but he really nailed it. And he said, the problem with that perspective is that it tends to rob you of the joy of Catholicism. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's true at all, or do you think it misses the point?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of truth to it. I mean, certainly. Well, I mean, I'll give you an example from life. Given that most of the parishes that were available to me when I was younger were horrible, I made a point of avoiding them.
Right. Yeah.
Because if Cardinal Mahoney wasn't going to set them to rights, I certainly wasn't going to be able to do anything. It didn't stop me from occasionally harassing them. And of course, when I got my column, Roman Catholic, that was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Because I was finally able to do something with these people, in the sense of outing them for what they were, all through just describing what they did on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And it became the most feared column in the paper. Even though I never said a bad word about any of the priests. I just described in detail what they did.
That's actually very true. And that was so you, where you actually left it understated. And it was sort of almost like it induced outrage because you weren't outraged at all. You simply said it, so you left it for everyone reading it to feel what should have rightly been felt.
Well, yeah, I mean, I figured if the reader didn't see there was a problem there was no point in my spelling it out. But I would put it very bluntly, but not. I never expressed an opinion about it. I just described what happened.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's always a slight twinkle. I mean, one of my editors said, you don't make your opponents look like the sons of Satan. You make them look like the sons of Bozo. And I kind of like that a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, from time to time, I mean, I remember one time I had my editor was a little annoyed with me because I wrote that the altar boy had playfully goosed the altar girl in front of him. And he had. That's what he did.
Yeah.
And he said, well, goosed is vulgar. I said, all right. How about he playfully inserted his hand, never mind, sick with goose.
Ah.
Well, those are the choices we had to come up with from time to time. Another time, I wrote that the priest had minced out. Well, he didn't. Minced, M-I-N-C-E-D.
Yeah, but what does that mean?
Well, back in the day, people knew what it meant. He said, my editor looks at it and says, "We can't say that. That's terribly insulting. It makes him sound queer." And I said, "Well, all right, let me show you how he walked." And I did. And then I said, "Now, let's look up minced in the dictionary. To mince, to walk in a strange or affected manner." I said, "Now, to me, what I just did there is mincing." That's what the priest did. He minced out. And if you say, well, it makes him sound queer, it's how he looked. It's not my doing, it's what he did. If you've got a word that better describes the way I just walked, okay. But if not, I can't see any alternative to minced. And he said, well, neither can I. If that's how he walked, he said, I can't think of a better word. I said, well, neither can I. That's why I used it. Those are the mincing and the goosing. Those are the two biggest fights I got into with my editor on that column.
Wow.
And I would, I would say that if you're in an area, I mean, that was a period when we had a lot of independent Catholic papers springing up.
Mm.
And that format of mine was imitated a lot. I think if especially after Benedict came along, the need for that kind of journalism sort of slowed away. But now with trash can custodians and Pope Francis's little friends, perhaps it's necessary to bring it back. You see, that way you can have all the satisfaction of exposing them without having to go to jail for breaking their jaws. And the best part of it is, you'll find that priests of that sort, even if you don't say anything bad about them, they get very upset. Very, very upset.
Okay. So
I remember when one of the fun things that happened with that paper. You may remember Elmer Dills, the restaurant reviewer. Well, I was listening to the television, and he reviewed this restaurant in Glendale called Far Niente, which is Italian for do nothing. And it in the course of the review, he said that it was Cardinal Mahoney's favorite restaurant, and they had a picture of him on the wall and had named one of their dishes Fettuccine Cardinal Mahoney. So we're doing a restaurant review. He says, we don't do restaurant reviews. And I said, oh, I think you're going to want me to do this one. Because I knew it would drive His Eminence up a wall. So I reviewed it. It was a straightforward review. And my only quotes about him were the waiters saying that he was a red wine man, and he was easy to serve. That was all. There was nothing the slightest bit derogatory about it. Just very matter of fact. But it was the only time that his spokes creature directly responded to the paper. And he sent out an angry note saying that it sounded like I was stalking the cardinal. And so, yeah, I know. Well, see, I knew it would drive him mad because he was a very petty man. So my editor says, how do you want to respond? I said, oh, I know how to respond. All right. And my response was, it's amazing considering all the many issues facing the archdiocese that this paper has covered, that the only one to provoke an official response has been food.
Wow. Wow.
Well, the funny thing, when your brother went up north and worked for our Bay Area affiliate,
Yeah.
he got
Okay.
my job. You know the story I'm going
I
to tell.
know it exactly. Yes. Great euphemisms. Okay.
So the thing was that a mutual friend of ours had got up to San Francisco and encountered a church called Holy Redeemer in the Castro, and had run shrieking after the French Kiss of Peace, all male congregation. Well, incidentally, Archbishop Corleone put an end to that when he took over.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, that was the matter then. So when your brother took on the job, he says to me, "All right, I've got to do my first. I don't know the Bay Area at all. What would you recommend for my first church to review?" I said, "Oh, I'd go to Holy Redeemer," and he did. I get this nasty call. He was so angry with me. He said, "You bastard! You knew what you were sending me into. It was horrible." And he goes on and on and on. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Steve, this is your first column for the paper. You have to establish a name right now. Now stop and think. You just write down what you saw. You will be made." And it was true. He just wrote it down. But he was so mad, he thought I'd sent him there just to torture him.
He went through the
It wasn't
French kiss of
true.
peace.
Yeah. Well, when it's an all-male congregation, the French kiss of peace can be somewhat upsetting if you're not, you know, uh, working for Grindr at the Vatican.
It's true.
So he it made an impression on it. And I have to admit, I'd be lying if I said I was entirely free of malice when I sent him, but I did know that it would be the best way to start his column, and I also knew it would be better if he didn't know what he was getting into.
Whew. All right.
Oh, it was an effective column. If you ever dig it up, he really went to town on it. And again, I'm happy to say, he followed my advice. He didn't say it was disgusting, it was horrible. He just described it clinically, and that made it all the worse. I mean, it just made it really, really horrible. And it was horrible. So I think we have to be clever in how we deal with these creatures.
Yeah.
And of course, today we've got the internet. So, I mean, there's nothing, if you're living in a diocese that's really corrupt, there's nothing that stops you from doing that kind of review.
But we're talking about like cardinals and other stuff.
Call Grindr. Get put right through. What? Oh, so people shouldn't have direct recourse to their prelates. I see. It's sad, but it won't last forever. Nothing does. I mean, let's look at it this way. 25 years ago, the kind of thing I saw in Madeira would have been unthinkable. There were elements of the Austrian government and in the Austrian hierarchy, church hierarchy, that did not want Karl beatified. And they kept his beatification was complete, including the miracle in 1960.
Yeah.
Why was it delayed 44 years? Because of that kind of opposition. And the only reason why that was broken was because Pope John Paul II loved Karl and was named after him. So here we are.
The one other thing that I'm just reminded of as my mind is being jogged by this question, I'm reminded of something Cardinal Sarah says. I think it's in God or Nothing, his book God or Nothing.
Que sera, sera?
Yeah, que sera, sera. And he said, he starts the book so sharp, where he basically, calls everyone Judas because we believe that the way to get things, he says, you're a Judas if you believe the way to get things done is the way of the big corporation, activism, physical doings, that you have belief in this sort of, just activism compared to prayer. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, what he's describing is what condemned as Americanism. So it's not like he started out that way.
Right.
It's a problem that goes back a long way. I mean, it's the idea that the active virtues are superior to the contemplative ones. You see it with Joseph II when he abolished all the contemplative monasteries in his empire, and the only ones that kept going were those that were willing to take on parish work.
Wow.
Which is why to this day, all the great abbeys, Benedictine, Cistercian, and so on in this country, they all have parishes. And interestingly enough, that system would later be imported to the United States when abbeys were founded by monks in this part of the world. That's why half the parishes in Minnesota are run by Benedictines. It's in St. Cloud, St. John's Abbey. Collegeville, not St. Cloud, Collegeville. And there are other parts of the country where that's the case, because Joseph II insisted that if they wanted to stay open, they had to do something useful, i.e. run parishes.
Yeah. The other thing that springs to mind, just sort of in stream of consciousness mode, because I totally get Vendée's frustration, and you feel powerless, and you just want it to stop, and you want sort of, you just want to feel like you're putting more energy into it rather than simply praying. The one thing that I really like that we do for a different matter, it sort of combines prayer with activism, which is the local pro-life groups going in front of the Planned Parenthood clinics and praying the rosary there. I really like those because it's sort of like, I feel like it merges those two worlds, kind of.
Well, it does. And another thing, and you had experience with this in another area, another matter. If you stop giving to your parish or your diocese, and you give to another Catholic organization, be sure to send a copy of the check to your pastor or your bishop with a notation that this could be yours if you ever start being Catholic.
Yeah, I did that to a local establishment that I really liked a lot, but they were being stupid and they were being woke. And I went somewhere else and I showed them the receipt, and they went absolutely off the deep end. But you know what I didn't tell you, Charles? You know what I didn't tell you? After the fact, like 2 weeks after the fact, I got what I wanted, and all the wokery, all the principles, actually went out the window in favor of money.
Really? So is it?
Yeah.
Can I go there now?
Yeah.
Good.
So I felt like it
really
worked. I felt like your tactic absolutely 100% worked.
And you also liberated it for the rest of us.
Yes.
Because they do make a wonderful product.
Yeah.
I mean, the hands down.
Yeah. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, so send those receipts. Send those. This is what you could be getting, because you're gonna get some screaming. You're gonna get some screaming, but at the end of the day, people got to eat.
Well, especially in the post-COVID world, where after 2 years of not going to mass, a lot of people aren't going to go back, and a lot of people won't be. One of the things that really drove me a little crazy at the height of all that was the websites of parishes that said, no masses, no confessions. Send your donation. No.
Well, you had the line for that one, right? My donation will be just as present as the Eucharist, as the communion I receive.
Yeah, exactly
spiritual
right.
communion, spiritual
donation. I'll pray for your parish, Father. I'll pray you find a way to pay your bills. Bye-bye. I sure pray you don't close because you don't have any dough. That'd be sad. And it would make a real difference in my life. Instead of not being able to receive the sacraments from a Catholic church, I would not be able to receive the sacraments from a closed church.
Well, that's very true.
But didn't I set you up? Didn't I take care of you during the worst days?
Deepest, darkest days of COVID. I had actually nowhere to go, and I tapped into Charles. Charles, I need to get a confession. I need the sacraments. When literally no one would. It was actually literally. Well, actually, the only one in the entire Orange County and Los Angeles County and San Bernardino County was actually St. Michael's.
Yeah.
Which got so much funding, they got hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's one of the that's an example where it's
if you do your job, this is to all you priests and bishops out there. If you do your job, the money will come.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't, it won't. But I got you hooked up, and I felt hey kid, you look like you need a confession, huh? Okay. Go to St. Bruno's over on the east side. Knock on the rectory door. Say the sky's blue, ocean's green.
It happened kind of like that too.
I know. It was really so stupid.
It was so surreal.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I had no problem going to confession though. All during that, I was going regularly.
Oh right,
at his own parish.
I was incredibly jealous.
No, not me. You know who was doing it where you are? You had no trouble at all.
Your godson, too.
Well, him too, but no, I was thinking of Officer Clancy.
Oh, of course. Well, there's helping people, right?
Well, he'd go up to the rectory, and he'd say, Father, I see you're in. There are no masses and no confessions. Looks like you got a lot of time on your hands, doesn't it? Well, isn't it funny? In my position, a good long confession comes in very handy. And you know how it is. In a neighborhood like this, I'd hate to see your windows broken. They look like they'd be very expensive. Well, they're 19th century work, aren't they? Father, I sure hope you can find it in your heart to hear the confession of a poor, simple policeman. And given that his confessions generally run about 4.5 hours a pop,
Well, I mean, that's it then, right? For Vendée Radio, maybe the answer for all of this is we
do like Officer Clancy.
Officer Clancy is the answer. That's the solution.
That's true. Father, I notice you're very fond of your little dog there. I sure hope nothing happens to him. I've had a lot of dogs run over recently. It'd be terrible. But you know what? If you could look to my confession, I'll make sure nothing happens to the little lad. And as a result, little Inky lives happily at the rectory to this day.
Yep.
I mean, it could have been otherwise, but Father saw reason. The windows at St. Bruno's are just as they always were. Little Inky the dog plays happily in the rectory garden. And all because Officer Clancy was able to get confession during COVID. Isn't that a heartwarming tale?
That is to know that somewhere Officer Clancy is fighting for us.
Monsignor. Oh, I love the new Lincoln Continental you just bought. I sure hope no one slashes the tires. Wouldn't it be great if the neighborhood lads didn't egg it?
All right, we are well over 2 hours.
We are.
Time to close up shop.
It sure are.
Any last words, Charles?
Yes, I do. Holy Week is upon us, Easter, and this is an important time to remember that whatever miseries and horrors we have to go through in our regular lives, whether endemic to the human condition or particular to the period in which we live, remember that we share Holy Week with our Lord, and that if we do share it with Him, both chronologically and spiritually, that He shall certainly share His Easter with us. Rabbits and eggs, strictly optional.
Yeah. All right.
What are you gonna have for Easter? Ham or lamb?
I rarely have had the opportunity to have lamb. I want to have it more, but historically, my mom has really favored ham, so we usually do that. But we'll see.
The best Easter I've had since the Easter Bunny stopped coming?
Yeah, what?
I'll tell you, it was in 2014. And what happened was that I was staying at that time in Connecticut. Yes, this is the same period when I got this wonderful tie in beautiful Goshen, Connecticut. And I went to, on Good Friday, I went to, there's a shrine called Lourdes in Litchfield, Connecticut. And I made they do the Stations of the Cross on Good Friday. And then I went to the Abbey of Regina Laudis in Bethlehem for the Good Friday service. And then I drove to my cousin in Greenwich, Connecticut, left off the car, and took the train into New York, and stayed with Rich Count Guido in the village. So I did that was Saturday, and I did the Holy Saturday Vigil at Holy Innocents. Well, the next morning, went to the Tridentine Mass, soon to be discontinued now, at St. Agnes in New York. And then my pal Steve McDonald and I was in my morning coat. We walked in the Easter parade. And that was really, really a bizarre and wonderful experience, going up and down Fifth Avenue and seeing all the bizarre costumes. Then Steve went off to his family, and I went to the King Cole Bar of the St. Regis Hotel, where they had a wonderful Easter brunch with deviled eggs and lamb. And I consumed it. I was about to leave when these young people at the bar, the gentlemen were all in morning coats. And the chicks, oh gosh, they were big hats and beautiful dresses, and their cocktails all seemed color coordinated. And so they said, sir, and I said, yes. You're the oldest man we've ever seen in a morning coat. And I said, well, it's Easter. They said, yes. So we have a drink with us. I said, certainly. So I introduced these young men and women to various cocktails they'd never had before, including the fabulous bull shot, which your brother can tell you about because I introduced him to it. Beef bouillon and vodka.
Wow.
You add tomato juice, it becomes a bloody bull shot. So we had 5 or 6 or 7 of those. And I'll tell you what, by the time I was done with them, I was ready to fly. But I had to get the train and go back up to Greenwich to have Easter dinner with my cousin and aunt and so on. So I said, well, kids, I've got to go. And then it suddenly hit me. But before I go, we should sing. And what we sang was Easter Bonnet. And the whole, it should have hit me, but everybody in that bar had been on the Easter parade. Everybody sang the song. I mean, it was great. It was wonderful.
Wow.
And then I waved my topper at everyone, and everyone waved back, and I staggered out, poured myself onto the train up to Greenwich, missed my station by 1, so my cousin had to pick me up one further down, picks me up, takes me back, and had a wonderful ham dinner for Easter. So I had my deviled eggs, my lamb, and my ham. And of course, my aunt was there, and it was my late lamented Aunt Jenny. It was a wonderful, wonderful Easter. And so it's in that spirit, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave you with this ancient consecrated Easter canticle. In your Easter bonnet, with all the frills of it, you'll be the grandest lady in the Easter parade. Oh, I could write a sonnet about your Easter bonnet and of the girl I'm taking to the Easter parade on the avenue, Fifth Avenue. The photographers will snap us, and you'll find that you're in the rotogravure. Oh, I could write a sonnet. No, sorry. Oh, I'll be all in clover, and when they look us over, I'll be the proudest fellow in the Easter parade. Happy Easter, ladies and gentlemen.